Hey there, my name is Dr. Ben Glass. I'm a chiropractor, and this is the Pre-Chiro podcast, where we're really centering our voice on the prospective student who's considering this path of becoming a chiropractor. Today, I have distinguished honor of introducing Dr. Jack Bourla, who I met in chiropractic school. He's been involved in chiropractic for a while now and is currently sitting as the president of the IFCO. So I'm really excited. This is one of the more important conversations that I've been looking forward to having because I think that every student that's going to chiropractic school just needs to know about that organization. But can we just get started by you introducing yourself,
Sure.
sharing with us what you were up to before chiropractic school? Because I believe you were a career changer.
Yeah.
So yeah, just let us know where you're coming from.
Awesome. So before college, before becoming a chiropractor, I had a number of careers. I taught for 2 years at San Francisco State University, where I taught in the biology department. I was a lecturer in biology. I taught human physiology, human biology, and human sexuality. And after that, I left college after teaching for 2 years, and I worked as a family planning counselor. And while I was doing that, I saw a job at Stanford that I applied for. I became one of the head administrators for the Stanford University Blood Center. And while I was there, I became very good friends with the two medical directors. And they were about to start a new biotechnology company and asked me if I would consider running it with them. And I said, of course. And so I left Stanford and I went to go work for a biotech company for about 10 years. And that was during the 80s when biotechnology was fresh and it was innovative and a lot of excitement. And after about 10 years, I became a director of the company, and my boss was a senior executive vice president. He wasn't going anywhere. And so I thought, well, my career here is about as high as I can possibly get. And so I did something really stupid, and I went and bought 3 restaurants. So I owned and operated 3 restaurants for about 5 years. And after 5 years, I said, that's enough. I just don't want to do this. And I was faced with the decision, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And as a Jewish kid, a Jewish boy particularly, I was faced with really a decision quite early on with 2 career choices. One was either to become an attorney or become a doctor. And I didn't have it within me to want to wake up every morning to argue. So I decided I would become a doctor. And so I started looking at different things. Now, I thought about becoming a doctor very early in my life. In fact, if we have time, I'll tell you the story. In 1967, I got turned on to an incredible concept, and this is how it worked. My parents are immigrants from Algeria, North Africa, and my father came in the 1950s because he heard that the streets were paved with gold, and he wanted some. And so he and my mother took the Queen Mary, and they sailed over to New York, and they found a way to come to San Francisco because there was a nice French Algerian population here in San Francisco. And my father was quite appreciative of the opportunity to be here. He's one of those like immigrant stories where hard work will pay off. And so he appreciated the fact that we're here, and he wanted to instill in his children an appreciation for us being here as well. And so what we used to do is we used to get up really early in the morning and have breakfast together. In fact, I used to have coffee with him from about 4 years on, mostly milk, but a little bit of coffee. But what we would do is during breakfast, we always had the newspaper. Now, newspaper, I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a piece of paper that's printed, and news was on that. We don't have those very much anymore. But what we would do is he would take a section, give it to me, and he would read a section, and then we would swap sections, but he would ask me questions about the section that I just read. And I remember reading in 1967 about a story of a cardiovascular surgeon in South Africa named Christian Barnard. And Christian Barnard was the first surgeon to perform a successful human heart transplant. And when I read that and I was just kind of baffled by how is it that we can take an organ from one body, put it into another body, and have that other body take and function. And I know there's some manipulations that go on in terms of immune suppression, but nonetheless, I was fascinated by how the body worked. How is it? What was so intelligent about that body that it allowed a foreign tissue to be introduced into it and yet function? And so in the back of my mind, from about the time that I was 12 on, I was reading science and I was interested in biology. And I always had in the back of my mind that I might become a doctor. And you know how the life happens and the universe delivers you different things. I got married at a very young age. I got married when I was 21 to a woman with 2 children. And so going to medical school was not a possibility. So I had to do other things. But now, fast forward many, many years later. And I'm
Mhm.
faced with an opportunity now to decide what do I want to do with my life. And so I decided on chiropractic because you've heard of these miracle stories
Mhm.
in chiropractic. Now, I don't believe there are miracle stories in chiropractic. What I believe is that when you enhance physiology, great things can happen, but they're not miraculous. I think birth is a miracle.
Mhm.
How that happens, it blows my mind. But when normal physiology happens, great things can happen to the body. And so my late ex-wife had one of those stories, and the story goes something like this: we woke up on a New Year's Day after having spent New Year's Eve having fun, and she woke up unable to move her legs out of nowhere. And that just kind of shocked us. And so what do? I put her in the car and I take her to the local emergency room. And so we take her there and we admit her, and they do all the things. They image her and they medicate her and they inject her. And by about 3:30 in the afternoon, there was absolutely no change in her condition at all. And they said, well, you got to go home and see what happens and then check in with your primary doctor the next day. So we go home quite discouraged, and here she is, this very vibrant woman who's able to move her legs. And so we get home and we do the normal things on New Year's Day. We call our friends, wish them Happy New Year. So I talked to one of my friends, and I explained what our predicament was. And he says, why don't you call my chiropractor? And I had never been to a chiropractor before. And so I said, well, what is a chiropractor going to do that all these people in this hospital couldn't do? And he says, just call him. I said, but it's New Year's Day. He says, call him anyway. And so I did. I called him. And the interesting thing is that he answered his phone. And I could hear the kids in the background, and he was already at home. And I told him that his patient, my mutual friend, suggested I call him. I told him what our predicament was, and he says, well, why don't you meet me at 5:30 in the office? And so I said, well, where's your office, and how do I get there? And I'll see you tomorrow. He says, no, today, New Year's Day. And I thought that was really weird. A man would take away time from his family to meet someone he doesn't even know to see if he can help this woman whose legs don't move. So I put my wife back in the car, took her to the office, took her in, explained to him what was going on. He did an examination. He says, I'm going to take some x-rays. I had to hold her up so he could take the x-rays. He says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for something in the spine which is interfering with the proper function of her legs. And if she has that, I can help. If she doesn't have it, I can't help. And so, well, at that point, what do we have to lose? So, of course, we did. He put her on this table that went up and down. And of course, I was not familiar with any of this stuff. And he puts her in this position, and he makes a snapping sound, and he snaps again, and he does this, and he does her neck, and she walks out. And I thought, holy cow. I mean, if that can happen to her, what could happen to me? So I became a patient of his. And we went every Friday for years until he passed away. And once he passed, we found somebody else. But that was in the back of my mind many, many years ago. Now I'm 39 years old, faced with a decision what I want to do. And I remember chiropractic. So I looked at chiropractic colleges. Fortunately, in the Bay Area, there were two. I picked one. I matriculated, and that's the story.
Mm.
That's how I became a chiropractor.
And I appreciate the Reader's Digest. There's a lot of details that were left out, but that was the gist of what kind of planted the seed in your consciousness early on, and you came back to that because you had remembered. Yeah, so many people say, chiropractic changed my life. So many people say there was a miracle story, but like you said, once the interference is removed from the nervous system, good things happen. Once the spine starts functioning better, great things happen. So can we now get into some details of what your trajectory was like going through school as an older person, comparatively speaking, to some of the younger people that go to school? What was that like? What were some of the unique challenges, maybe some of the surprises that you encountered in chiropractic school, and how did you face those and adapt to those?
Great. These are all great questions. And by the way, a lot of these, even though I was older I was 39 going back, apply to people, even the young people today. And so when I went the very first day that I sat in these very uncomfortable blue plastic chairs at the college that I attended, I knew right away that there's something inside of me that was resonating with what I was hearing. I knew that there was an intelligence in the body, because I remember back when I was 12 about this heart transplant. I knew there's this thing, an intelligence in the body. I knew that when it expressed itself fully, that we could live a very vibrant life. And so that's what I heard. That's what I believed. And so I was then, how do I know more? And, at 39, you're a little bit more mature than you are maybe when you're 22 or 21. But nonetheless, what I recognized is that this was going to be a very challenging program, and I didn't want to do it alone. And so what I did is I found, after searching several weeks within my classroom 5 people who I thought were really going to excel. And so we became a study group. And so we, from first quarter all the way through 13th quarter, we stuck together and we protected each other and we studied with each other. We challenged each other. And to this day, we all remain great friends. And this was, 25 years ago. But what I did is maybe because I had a certain level of maturity and experience and having had different experiences that some of these other kids didn't have, I had a certain seriousness about me, but I also wanted to have fun. And so even though I was the oldest guy in my class, I think I may have graduated the youngest guy in my class because I sucked the youth out of everybody. I took all that energy and I said, how can I use this, not to take away from them, but to enhance me at the same time? And so we went through school and I loved what I was hearing. We studied a little bit of philosophy, not much though. I mean, honestly, most schools today, even worse than when I was in school, most schools today aren't teaching the philosophy like they should. Because I think that the philosophy of chiropractic is what grounds us, what makes us unique, very distinct and separate from any other profession in the world. We'll maybe talk about that in a little bit.
Yep.
So if people are interested in becoming chiropractors, they should probably know what the basis of chiropractic is. And it really has nothing to do with neck pain or back pain or sciatica or headaches or blurred vision or constipation or inability to become pregnant. It really has to do with how do we enhance a person's experience on planet Earth so they can express them fully and realize their full potential. And that's what I was hearing, and that's what I was seeing, and that's what I was trying to do. And so I think that if you're going to become a chiropractic student, that you should become well versed in the philosophy of chiropractic. And we have these things called green books. And unfortunately, many green books aren't even open in chiropractic colleges anymore. In fact, I would say they're not open in many of them. And in fact, there are many chiropractic colleges that even say that what we do as our basis is a historical concept. And what the basis is that we address what's called the vertebral subluxation. Vertebral subluxation is a 1 or 2 or more vertebrae which have misaligned and changed the neurology of the body. And when you change the neurology of the body is able to heal and express itself and regulate and reorganize the way it's intended to. And so we see a deficit in someone's ability to become their full potential. And so it is the vertebral subluxation, which makes us a unique profession. And it's not the vertebral subluxation, it's the location, the analysis, and the correction. And when we say the correction, we're really just assisting as chiropractors, this intelligence, this innate intelligence within the body to make the corrections for that person so that they can go on and express and experience life as it was intended for them. So if you're going to be a chiropractic student, I know that when you were a student, we talked a lot about this. In fact, I want to tell the audience that you were one of the most impressive students that I knew when you were a student because you had this desire to change the world. And that's what we chiropractors do. If you're not out to change the world, according to Reggie Gold, then everything else is just Mickey Mouse. And so if you're going to become a chiropractor, understand that you're entering the profession with this intention of changing people's trajectory from where they are to where they possibly could be and where they will become once their vertebral subluxations have been corrected.
Yeah, just to reflect on some of the highlights of what you just reflected on yourself. Self-reflection is such a key piece to becoming a chiropractor and seeing those experiences you had before school and the experiences you had while you were in school as being ways that you developed into who your character, into who you are. You mentioned the connections that you made with the fellow students around you. I believe that that's a different culture than you see in today's medical programs. There's a lot of competition to not only get into schools, but also to get better grades than your fellow students. And that's not showing up in your story at all. And I want to say that chiropractic student culture is much more collaborative, and there's a certain camaraderie that you need to partner up, buddy up, get into small groups of people that you trust and really push each other. So I think that was a great point. And developing lifelong connections. I'm now 9 years out of school and I still talk to the people that I was in school with on a regular basis, because not only do we have a similar philosophical viewpoint on the world, which is super important right now to have people you can connect with that see things similar to you, but also just to talk about practice. So let's use that as a segue to transition into your life and practice and what it was like getting out of school and sort of how you navigated your path and what you learned along the way, so that you can kind of give some insight.
Perfect. Yeah. So the interesting thing, Ben, is that when you do this self-reflection and you look at who you are and what you've done, you will realize that all the pieces that you've experienced were purposeful. They led you to who you are today. When I look back at my career and the different things that I did, for example, when I was teaching, I was 25 years old. I was teaching a lecture with 440 students on a topic, human sexuality, which is somewhat controversial. It's a little bit touchy, but it taught me the art of preparation. If you don't prepare well, if you don't rehearse, if you don't become an expert at your information and how to deliver it, then you're not going to be a good communicator. So the preparation allowed me to communicate, and the communication is one of the things as chiropractors that we absolutely have to master. So I look at what's my takeaway from teaching. That was my takeaway from teaching. When I look at what I did as a family planning counselor, it taught me the art of listening and to be empathetic, because you've got to listen to patients when you're in practice so that you understand where they are so that you can take them where they possibly could be. So you've got to be empathetic. You have to be a great listener. When I worked at Stanford, I had to have this organization, right, in leadership, because I was managing people and I was managing processes. And so you learn how to organize. When I went into biotech, I learned the real business there. I had back then I had a staff of 60 and I had an $8 million annual budget, which is a lot of money back in the 80s. But I had to learn how to budget. I had to learn how to develop projections. I had to learn how to manage large groups of people. And then when I had the restaurants, I learned customer service, because when you are a chiropractor, yes, we have this title of doctor. I wish we had never had the title of doctor. We know that, doctor in Latin means to teach. And so if we come from that perspective, then we're teachers. Yes, that's awesome. But the public sees doctors as, the white coat and that kind of sterile environment. And so as a chiropractor, that's not what we do. As a chiropractor, we actually connect with our people. Mm-hmm. We talk to them. We listen to them. We find out where they are. Then we find out how we can get them to a better place. And then so their life will transform, not because of them necessarily, because we know that every person we touch is connected to other people. Mm-hmm. And so if we help, for example, a mother become a better version of herself, she'll be a better mom, maybe a better partner, maybe a better citizen, maybe she'll be a better mayor, maybe a better governor, maybe a better state senator. We don't know the impact of what we do. BJ said, you never know how far reaching something you may do, think, or say will affect the lives of millions of people. On our situation today, it's billions of people. Mm-hmm. And so we have this opportunity by changing one person to change the trajectory of perhaps a whole state or a nation or perhaps a planet. And if we don't have that large mindset of planet, then we're thinking too small. We've got to think more globally. So all the things that I did back then unknowingly have led to who I have become today. And yes, I've got 20 plus years of experience as a chiropractor. But when I started out, I had some tools. And so when I remember in school, when I was a student in school, every morning I met at 7 o'clock one of my professors, because I knew he was going to be in the cafeteria having coffee. So I spent 35 cents of my own money buying him a cup of coffee every single morning, because I wanted to know what it was like to be in practice. He went to school with BJ. And so he knew all this stuff, and he had the finest set of hands I've ever seen. I mean, this guy was a phenomenal adjuster. But I wanted to know, and so I hung with him, and I remember talking to him and listening to him and telling me what he did. And I remember I had this arrogance about me that I used to tell him, I'd rather sit in my own office empty than work for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And guess what I did for the first couple of months in practice? I sat in my office empty rather than work for somebody else. In today's environment, unless you've got these unbelievable tools to market and sell and project yourself, then you're probably better off associating with somebody. Mm-hmm. And by associating, I mean, find someone that you respect. Find someone that is going to do things that you think you want to do. Learn from them, because the chiropractic business, even though I had restaurants and I was about tech, the chiropractic business is way different than those other businesses. Mm-hmm. And as a sole proprietor, right, as the person in my own office, yes, I may have people who work with me and for me, but as a sole proprietor, it's a different business, because I'm always on. Mm-hmm. I don't take a day off. Mm-hmm. I'm always on. If I'm out in public, I'm talking about chiropractic. Mm-hmm. And when someone finds out that you're a chiropractor, they have certain questions for you. And so you're almost always on. And so when I first got into practice and I realized that the only person calling my office every day was my mother, and that's not going to help me build the business, I had to go out. And so I joined some groups. Like I joined BNI, Business Network International. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it's an organization it's global. It's an organization where regional people come together, one profession per group, with the sole intention of building each other's businesses up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got into one of these groups. In fact, I started a group because it wasn't there. So I started a group with a bunch of other healthcare professionals, and we built this group up, and that's how our referral business started. So if you're not thinking business all the time, if you're not thinking helping people all the time, if you're not thinking about changing the planet all the time, then maybe you should think about doing something else in your life.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you might not be there yet. I mean, this is for prospective students. It's
Of
a lot
course.
to ask people, but it is important for them to hear that that's what you're up to, and that's what most chiropractors are up to, so that
Yeah.
they can wrap their mind around what the type of lifestyle they would have as a chiropractor.
Yeah.
So let's pivot now to the IFCO. You've got a leadership role right now. You're at the helm, so to speak. You mentioned previous experience with huge budgets. I
Yeah.
imagine you don't have an $8 million budget, but it would be nice to have a creative discussion. And if you did have 8 million, what would you do with it? Because I do think that we need to get more money infused into the profession so that we can be more on the offensive and not the defensive. But that's
Yeah.
just my own personal viewpoint. What are you up to with the IFCO? What is the IFCO about? Can you introduce it to the prospective audience?
Sure. So there are several organizations throughout chiropractic. There are state organizations, there's national organizations, and then there are, excuse me, there's international organizations, and we're one of the international organizations. It stands for the International Federation of Chiropractors and Organizations. And it was developed in the mid 70s by Reggie Gold. Reggie Gold, as you know, and maybe the pre-students don't know, but Reggie Gold was quite a character in chiropractic. And he saw a need to make sure that the foundation of chiropractic was well protected and promoted. And so he was one of the founders of this organization. It actually started out as the FSCO, the Federation of Straight Chiropractors and Organizations. And then we changed it several years ago because straight was a little bit disruptive and it was a little bit misleading, because straight chiropractors has nothing to do with your preference in terms of sexuality or partners. It has to do with this idea of making sure that the basis of your practice is the location, the correction, and assisting the body to location analysis and assisting the body to correct vertebral subluxations. That's what the IFCO does. So believe it or not, there are colleges that don't teach this. There are organizations which boo-hoo this, and there are government agencies that are listening to some of these people talk, and they want to kind of dilute us out. And so IFCO, the sole intention of IFCO is to make sure that those doctors who want to practice in this manner and those patients who want to receive this type of care are enabled to do so. That's all we do. We're not the police. There was a time when the IFCO had a reputation of being like the profession's police, and if you did anything other than locating and correcting vertebral subluxation, that you weren't a chiropractor. That's not what we do. What we do is we want to make sure that foundation is strong, so that those chiropractors who want to practice this way can do well and do so, and those patients who want to receive that care are enabled to do so. So that's what the IFCO does. I got involved in the IFCO actually because of a Life West, which is where you went to college, a Life West event. There was a thing called the Wave. And social media has brought lots of people there. There's a lot of discussion about social media, but one of the things that social media does is, at least at its purest form, is it brings people together. And so people from different parts of the country, people from different parts of the world can kind of meet socially on this media platform. And then when you get together physically, it's as if you guys have been friends for a long, long time. And so when this Wave came out, I met one of my better friends in chiropractic, Dr. Liam Schubel. And Liam Schubel was one of the speakers, and he came out, and he was very, big personality, and he was very committed and very grounded in the philosophy. And so we were hanging out that weekend, and I said to him, Liam, you seem very well grounded. What do you do? What do you support? And so he told me the things he was doing, and he told me about this organization called the IFCO. And so I said, well, if you feel so strong about it, I'm going to join. So I joined as a member, and I love the things that I was seeing. I love the fact that they were really strong in their foundation. And my next question was, well, how can I help? And he says, well, you can help by starting to recruit some members. And so I started recruiting some people locally into the IFCO. And because I was recruiting some people in the IFCO, he suggested that I maybe apply for a board position. And so I applied for a board position, and through a lot of scrutiny. Now, in chiropractic, we're kind of, the brotherly sisterly love, and, everybody's welcome. But this organization was actually scrutinizing people to make sure that they were the right people on the board, because the board is going to direct the activities of the organization. And so I appreciate the fact that I was scrutinized. And in fact, I was hammered. Because although I thought I was well-grounded, I wasn't as well-grounded as I could have been. And so because of the scrutiny, it allowed me to become even more grounded. And so they accepted me as a board member. And I became a very active board member. And then an opportunity came up, and they suggested I maybe run for president. And so I did. And I became the president. So I did a couple of terms as president. And then I came off the board, and they made me the chairman of the board. And I did that for a year. And then they wanted me to come back on as the president. So they reelected me the president. So I am the current president. And we'll hopefully have a shift at the end of this month, because we have another board meeting come up. And I will probably be coming off as the president, and we'll put someone else in that place. And we already have some pretty good candidates on who we want there. And I'll rejoin now as the chairman of the board again. And what we do is we work with chiropractors all over the world to make sure that they have this ability to practice. And what we're doing this time, Ben, is we're doing things a little bit differently. We're forming what's called councils. And councils aren't committees. Councils are actually groups of people who are very committed to, for example, animal chiropractic or philosophy or technique. We have a council for Latin America. We have, the people in Latin America are hungry for vertebral subluxation. And so they've gravitated towards us. And so they're actually driving and pushing us to make sure that we include them as a separate council. So they'll operate within the IFCO umbrella, but on their own, because culturally they do things a little bit differently than we do. But their sole purpose, like all of ours, whether it's animal or pediatric, it's always about coming back to the foundation. That is the location, the analysis, and correction of vertebral subluxation, because we know that vertebral subluxations are a detriment to one's expression of full potential. So that's what the organization does.
Awesome. Yeah. If you're a student and you want to learn more, we'll post some more information below, of course, just connecting you to these different organizations so that you can learn more about the profession through these organizations, because they're obviously committed to centering chiropractic in the messaging and representing chiropractic as they see it's best represented. We have had conversations with the Latin American IFCO president and the vice president, Dr. Dennis Grant Dennis.
Dennis Grant he's actually our vice president in the United States, but he's very much in charge of the councils.
Okay.
And so he's been working very closely with I don't know who were you talking to in Latin America? Do you remember? We were talking with Hans.
Hans, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
In Spanish.
Awesome. So Hans is in Chile, and he's terrific. I mean, he's a terrific human being. He's a terrific chiropractor and very committed. And so
he actually connected us with about 8 other Latin American chiropractors that we've had on here speaking Spanish.
That's awesome.
Just about chiropractic, and we're really trying to build the infrastructure here so that people that are coming into chiropractic school have more structure that can support them, that can be connecting the dots for them of, maybe they go to the IFCO page after they hear this interview, and then they see the councils, and then those councils lead them to specific individuals that they want to learn more from, that they can go to those websites, or they can look for somebody in their community who is representing that type of chiropractic. So
awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. We're doing it, man.
Thank you.
What's the vision right now? You're heavily involved. You're professionally engaged on multiple levels. What's the vision that you have right now for, as you see things going? What's a best case scenario for the profession, or your impact on the profession?
I would like, and this is in alignment with the IFCO vision and mission, and that is every human being on the planet checked for vertebral subluxation and adjusted when necessary from birth until their last breath. That's my goal. Only because I know that people who are without vertebral subluxations are a better version of themselves, are likely to be better community partners, better leaders within our community. And again, A lot of people go into chiropractic because they want to help people, and that's noble. That's a huge noble cause. But you can help someone who's asymptomatic become even a better version of themselves. And so we do all the things that we do without the necessity of a therapeutic or a diagnostic. We just do it because we're looking for these verbal subluxations, and it's amazing what happens when they're gone. It's amazing how someone can flourish. I don't know how much time we have left, but if you'd like, I'd tell the story about my son. And the reason that's such an important story for me is because that's what keeps me fresh every single day. And that's what keeps me going to the office with great enthusiasm. And so if you don't mind, I'll tell that story.
Absolutely.
It's a great story. So my son, who is now 11, when my wife was pregnant with him, she was studying space engineering in Strasbourg, France. And so we would communicate, on Skype back then. And she said to me one night that she would like to have a home birth. And I said, if that's what you want, that's what you're going to get. Because who am I to argue with a pregnant woman? That's not a good fight to have. And so what I said is, let's independently research in this area, the San Francisco Bay Area, the best midwife that we can find, and then we'll compare notes to see who we come up with. And lo and behold, we came up with the exact same person. So we selected this woman who was in Los Gatos, not too far from here. And so when she returned back to the United States after doing her studies in space engineering, we started to attend these classes. So we attended all the classes, and we kind of knew what was going to happen. We were well versed in what was going to happen. And our son was due August 11th. And on July 30th, we're at the veterinarians with our dog, and my wife's water broke. And so what a good man does is he panics. And so I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off. And she says, calm down, call Rosanna. So I called Rosanna, and I said, we're at the vet, her water's broke. And so they send you home with this tub. Did you guys have a home birth for your?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So, do you have a tub birth, a water birth?
We had it in our bathtub. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. Well, they sent us home with this tub. And we didn't have time to put this tub together because we're like, 11 days, 12 days out. And so she says, go home. So we went home, and we had a bathtub, a jacuzzi tub in our downstairs bathroom. So I put her in the tub, and she's moaning and groaning, and the whole thing's going on. And I'm panicking, and I get her out of the tub, and she's just really, really uncomfortable, making lots of noise. And this is at 5:30 in the afternoon. At 9:30, I hear the knock on the door, and there's 5 women. I was never so happy to see 5 women at my front door at 9:30 at night. And they came in, and they came in, and they examined her, and they said, she's fully dilated. This kid should be coming out any minute. And so she was pushing, and they're doing the tub and in and out of the tub. And then finally, Evan passes first bowel movement, the meconium. And so our midwife says, that's it, we have to transport. And so we called an ambulance. The ambulance came. We went down to the hospital. Unfortunately for us, there was a midwife in the emergency on staff. And so our midwife exchanged information with this midwife, and she examined her, and she said, look, I think that this baby's in great distress. Do you mind if we monitor her? And I said, you do whatever you have to do to make sure that my baby and my wife get out of this mess alive. And so they put this thing on her scalp, and she said, boy, we're in distress here. I'm going to call the emergency pediatrician. So they called this emergency pediatrician, and he came in, and just as he came in, out came Evan. Now, I had been present for my daughter's birth, so I knew what it looked like. And when Evan came out, he came out with no color. I mean, transparent white skin. He's got these beautiful green blue eyes. They were kind of yellow brown. He wasn't moving. He wasn't making any noise. He wasn't nothing. And I didn't envision cutting the umbilical cord. That whole thing didn't happen. She cut the umbilical cord. She passed the baby off to this pediatrician, this emergency pediatrician, and Erin my wife had no idea what was going on because she's in pain, and they had this curtain up the whole thing. And so I told her, I said, hang on a second, I'm going to go check on the baby. So I went over to the doctor, and I said, doctor, tell it to me straight, what's going on? And he said, this kid's in a lot of trouble, and we don't know what's going to happen. I said, well, what are the choices? And he says, well, one, he could pass. I said, okay, that's not an option. What else you got? He says, well, he could be here for a long time. It depends on how much meconium he has aspirated into his lungs. And I said, so what are you going to do? He says, well, we're going to take him into the neonatal ICU. We'll work on him. We'll call you in a few hours, and we'll let you know what the status is. I said, okay, but before you do that, I would like my wife to hold him. Whatever life was left in him, I wanted her to at least touch him. And so I carried him. He said, quickly. So I carried him to her. And as I'm carrying, I'm thinking, I'm a chiropractor. I should probably check him. because what happened is that the reason he wasn't coming out is because even though she was fully dilated, part of her cervix was caught on his head. So every time she pushed him out, the cervix was pushing it back in. So he was doing this for about 6 hours. And so I figured something upper cervical was got to happen. So I palpated his neck, and I didn't have thermography, and I didn't have x-rays. All I had was my hands and a great desire to do something. And I felt his atlas was sticking way, way out to the side. So I did a gentle adjustment, and I don't remember if it cavitated or not, but I did the gentle adjustment. Aaron held him for a second. I gave him back to the doctor, and up he went. And then we got Aaron settled into her room, and about 45 minutes later, I said, I'm just going to go check on the baby. So I left her. I went into the needle ICU where you look through the window and there's airlocks and gowns, and there's no one else in there but my kid, the doctor, and the nurse. And the doctor and the nurse were just standing in front of the bassinet, and they weren't doing anything. And I thought, oh, this is not good. So I busted in, no gown, no nothing. I went in and I said, Doc, what's going on? And he says, we don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? He says, we don't know what happened, but his APGAR score is way over 9. He's breathing. He's healthy. You can take him.
Chiropractic.
So I grabbed that kid and walked out. And as I was walking out, then I thought, what if the only reason I went to chiropractic college was to deliver that one adjustment?
Yeah.
Was that worth the $200,000 and 3.5 years of intensive work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you bet it was. Yeah. And so now when I see that boy, every night when I kiss him goodnight, and every morning when I see him in the morning, wake up, and I look in his eyes, these beautiful blue-green eyes, I think, my purpose on earth is to assist other people to live their potential.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Great message. That's super on point and life-changing, just to be able to have that type of experience with somebody you care about more than than words can describe. So I have to run on that note, but I really appreciate your time tonight and sharing with anyone out there who's looking for a path of purpose, looking for a path that will bring them much enjoyment in what they get to do every day. It sounds like you've really made the most of your decision to take this upon yourself at 39 years old. It's really beautiful to exemplify the transition of careers, because I think that that's a huge population that if they knew what they could do as chiropractors, they would strongly consider this. And really, I just want people to strongly consider this path. I don't want people listening to this to just be like, okay, I need to be a chiropractor. It's just like, hey, strongly consider it, give it some thought. So anyway, appreciate you, Dr. Jack. And we'll post more information about the IFCO and ways to get involved. Whether you're a student, whether you're a prospective student, hopefully we can get a council for pre-chiro, for pre-chiropractic going. And we'll have further discussions about that. But I want you to have a beautiful evening. And I got to run. So thank you so much, man.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate you, brother.
Always.